is another episode of your favorite podcast, Oops All Dragons. I am Lisa.
And I'm Varun.
And we got a fun little time for you guys today. But Varun, what's been up with you? It's been a minute.
So, couple things. The main thing, I won't go into the details, but there's KFC in my house for the first time in like a decade. And the takeaway from eating this KFC in 2021 is never eat KFC ever again. It has absolutely betrayed me. I had one piece of chicken, some mashed potatoes and a biscuit, and now I think that food is taking all of the water from my body. Because I think it was just one large piece of salt that I ate.
Oh God! just a lick to the side of a
Salt
Himalayan mountain. I eat KFC like kind of often because there's one near my house.
Proximity is not the issue. Like right. I have a KFC literally right around the corner for me, and I'm like, I get sick looking at it.
I don't think you understand. Now. I end up eating KFC on Sundays because there's a Chick-fil-A right next to it. And when I want to eat a chicken sandwich, the Chick-fil-A's closed, so I gotta go to KFC. So then I get the KFC chicken sandwich, and then I always forget to order the one that actually has lettuce and tomatoes on it.
It's just a chicken by itself.
And it's like the minimalist chicken sandwich. It's just a glorified chicken nugget on a bun with a sad piece of like a pickle, and it annoys me to no end.
I was gonna say,
like my stomach hates me for a day and a half after I eat it.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Every time.
I've eaten this a little over an hour ago, and I think I want to die. I think my body is just rejecting this. I may have something growing in me.
It's the kernel. You got a kernel of the kernel. Yeah, is it the kernel? Yeah,
yes,
it is.
Yes, the kernel.
Because I sit at work, and through the windows of the front of my job, because the front walls are like windows, I can see the sign with the kernel on it, and he stares into my soul for about 5 hours a day.
Oh my God.
Like, it's like brainwashing.
It's hypnotic.
Yeah. And for what? It's not even the best chicken sandwich in the chicken sandwich wars.
Hell no. Like,
no. And this is fact. It's Popeyes.
Yes. I think the chicken sandwich is a little more situational, but overall, from my experience of all the places that I've gone that are chains, then yeah. But Popeyes, I'll give them a caveat, because if that chicken sandwich is been sitting there for a minute, or if they overdo it with the breading, because sometimes they overdo it and just like half the sandwich is bread. I'm just like it's breading with bread, so like you're barely getting any meat in it. That's the worst. That's when I'm like no, Popeyes, you failed me, and I feel like I weigh 1 billion pounds. Because now I just have a rock of like hardened bread in my stomach. But another one throwing their hat in the ring of contention, which we don't really get down here, but a little more north, is Zaxby's.
Oh, Zaxby's.
Zaxby's chicken is good in general, and they just got like a new chicken sandwich with a new spicy like Zax sauce. That's pretty good too, because they even it out. Because another thing with the Popeye sandwich is, and I've noticed this, half of it will be like kind of, and I don't know how they cut it or whatever, but half of the actual meat is going to be like really thin, but then the other half is going to be like a giant chunk. So the giant chunk size is great, because you're getting a lot of chicken. But then if you start on the wrong side, then you just end up eating like the sad bit on the other side. Whereas Zaxby's evens their stuff out, so you get perfect chicken distribution.
Wait, okay, that brings up a question. All right, you've got a plate of food in front of you, or you've got a sandwich, or you've got like a Lunchable, whatever. Where do you start? Do you start from your least favorite part and leave your favorite part to the end, or do you eat the best part first and then suffer through the ending of it? This is very important. This is absolutely relevant.
I know exactly what you're thinking. It all depends on like how hungry I am, because if I'm very hungry, I'm not gonna care. I'm just gonna dig into it. But if I have that moment of like I can eat, but I also want to like savor this thing, then it's usually let's eat the sad bit first and then get to the good bit at the end. Because like with pizza the same way. Depending on the crust of the pizza, I will just rip that shit off or eat it ahead of time if it's just like sad, either too hard or too doughy, crust. I don't want that to be the last thing I eat. Whereas the rest of the pizza is like,
Yeah, this is an unpopular stance, but for me, the crust on a pizza is purely a handle for the rest of the pizza. That's not edible.
It depends.
I mean, like, if it's a really good pizza, I'll eat it, and, like, especially if it's, like, saucy and some of the sauce gets on the plate, and, like, I wipe up the sauce with the crust.
Get an
cool,
extra thing
great,
of marinara
amazing.
just for the crust.
Yes. But if it's, like, a dry-ass, like, fast, stupid... like a Domino's pizza?
Not even Domino's, because Domino's like put seasoning on their crust, like Papa John's. Like regular ass Papa John's crust is
just a real
worst.
plain man, just a plain dude, and just like you're here to serve a purpose to like help me hold this triangle, but I'm not putting you into my body.
So that comes into the question of stuffed crust. Because stuffed crust changes the game of, okay, now we're putting cheese into the crust, giving it some more utility, some more value, taking up more room from the actual pizza.
Yeah.
And they've done some crazy...
We're not talking about stuffed crust. We're just talking about crust, which I guess like squares and rectangles, but... Like a stuffed crust, that's a different beast.
Well, no, I bring it up because much like the KFC, I hadn't had stuffed crust in like a long time because I hadn't had Pizza Hut in a long time, up until a few weeks ago because my partner wanted some. So like, okay, fine, the marketing has worked, let's just get some, fine. And
you are not immune to propaganda.
The pizza itself was fine because it's Pizza Hut. It's not great. It's not terrible. But the crust itself, even with the cheese, it was the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, if without the cheese, it's kind of like sad and maybe like a little too filling. And now with the cheese, at least the one I got, I'm just like, this is way too much. It's
too rich.
I'm just gonna like roll over. Because now I'm just a giant block of cheese of a person.
Because not only is it just like the heavy bread of it, it's like this heavy dense bread, and then also just this like thick gooey, just like this dense cheese.
This ring of cheese that is just made into the crust. Because I don't know how they do it. I don't think they just take regular dough and roll it. I think it may just come like pre-made for them. They're like, stuffed crust TM.
Yeah, I can't imagine
crust.
some like 17-year-old in a Pizza Hut kitchen lovingly rolling like string cheese in the edge of a pizza dough. I'm pretty sure that comes made.
Yeah, we will retract that if you prove us wrong, Pizza Hut. But given what we've seen, like the pizza I got, it wasn't like when you take the slice, like the cheese is oozing out or something. It's like the cheese has been there. The cheese has been there for a hot minute and has become part of the bread. So it's like.
Now I'm thinking about the Brazilian cheese bread.
No.
Wait, have I never brought you?
I don't think so.
Pão de queijo.
Oh no, you did.
It's like similar to like a pan de bono.
You did one time, I think. Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a pizza made of that. That would be good. Wait, now I'm thinking about. All right, do you know about the Italians mad at food?
I've never heard of this.
Yes, it's screenshots of little like old Italian ladies screaming in like the comments of like those tasty videos or like those videos of like trendy fashiony like pizza places putting like random shit on pizza or like just making a real mockery of the culinary art of the Italians.
Sure.
And just being like, I hope rats poop in your mouth in your grave, or just like the most, just Italians mad at food. It's one of the few pure places left on the internet.
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple.
Food.
They're so good.
But
they're so funny.
Speaking of the tasty videos and pizza, I can see the worst one they'd react to is I don't know if it's Tasty or I forget. It's the one where the guys just like try cheap, medium, and then expensive food. I forget what that one's called.
Yeah, it's one of them.
I think it's the same like
derivatives.
Channel. Yeah, and there was one pizza that was like made with some kind of crazy expensive dough. The cheese itself wasn't like regular cheese. It was just some kind of like expensive cream cheese or something. It had like caviar, and I think it had gold on it. And
unnecessary.
And like, yes, it was unnecessary. The guys tasted it, and you can tell as they're eating it, they're like, "This is interesting. This is something that is a thing to experience." And there's no overwhelming comments of like, "This is great." And then they just take the rest of it back to their office, and they have the rest of their team. They're like, "Hey, we got this crazy expensive pizza. We don't want it. Like, have it." And one of the girls who eats it is just straight up like takes a bite. It's like, "Can I not eat the rest of this?"
Oh God! Sometimes
so like
things
just,
that are expensive are worse.
Yeah, so just like the bottom of the barrel pizza and crust, because now you've spent so much money on this and it's terrible.
What a shame.
My solution for that is thin crust. Like, I always love thin crust because it kind of depends on how they do it. If you do like Domino's sort of thin crust, that's too thin. That's paper. But a lot of the non-chain places I go to, they'll make it just thin enough that it's like little more than a cracker worth of like bread, the thickness on the crust.
Well, at that point, it just may as well be like a bruschetta or whatever they're called, like
It's
like a bruschetta.
But
I'm not gonna try to sound Italian here.
But it is but it's better, because at least for me, because then you eat the whole thing, like crust and all, because you're not like filling up on half a pound of bread or whatever for how much pizza that you're eating. So like you scarf it.
I feel like the key to ordering a good pizza is you gotta find a local place that when you walk in, the vibes are just rancid. You want some old Italian man screaming. You want him to look at you like he's mad that you're in there. That's how you know you're gonna get a good, authentic za.
Yeah, like, I guess.
I mean, at least in my experience, that has been true for pasta dishes. I will admit, if I can choose between like a baked ziti and a pizza, I'm gonna go with the ziti. But like, if I gotta have a pizza, I want some angry Italian man to make it.
Or an angry New Yorker, because if they're coming from New York and they're in whatever place that you might be,
Boca Raton.
Then if it's some sort of angry New Yorker or a very sarcastic New Yorker in the case of the place that I go to, then you're usually getting something good as well. They gotta have like weird vibes. Either they don't want you there, or like you're an inconvenience to them, but they'll give you this great food. That's the mark. That's the mark you gotta look for.
Yeah. Basically, look for your local mob front. And like, they really put some dedicated people in them kitchens.
Sure.
Legitimizes the business, okay?
Yeah, I guess it does.
You know what goes great with a pizza?
What?
A D&D one-shot.
There's a transition.
Wow. Yeah. That's what you come here for, kids.
Enough rando food talk.
Yeah, no, we really went on a tangent.
We did. I just chicken sandwich to pizza hate.
Yeah, how did we get here? Oh,
All
boy.
right. But yes, that is our topic for today.
Yeah.
D&D one-shots. What are they? Aspiring DMs and players will dig into the nitty-gritty, and then we'll tell some stories of the one-shots we've been involved with from both sides.
Well, we'll see if I divulge anything.
Sure. All right, so one-shots.
One-shots.
Previously, we've spoken about long-term campaigns, setting creation, all of that stuff about you're going to create your own setting, your own world. You're creating this big ongoing game for yourself and presumably your friends to be playing in.
I would hope you're playing with
I mean,
friends.
you could be doing a campaign for pay-to-play sort of situation as well.
I mean, I hope they're at least friendly.
Yeah, friendly. But it's becoming more and more of a thing that some folks D&D is more like of a business, which is something I want to talk about someday, but not today.
Put it on the board.
That's on the list. Yeah.
Yeah.
But one shots. It's pretty much the inverse of the investment that you need for a big old campaign, because campaigns are long. They're going to be multi-sessioned. You've got to schedule folks on a regular basis. Whereas a one-shot, as its name implies, it's going to be done once. It is either a module that you've got online or a book that you've got that's pre-made, or something that you're creating yourself, either from a world that you're already playing in, which is something I'll talk about toward the end, or just something you're creating off the top of your head, something completely, in a pocket universe somewhere else, that you're getting folks together for one day, one evening, whatever it is, and you're just going to say, hey, let's play out this story, let's play out this game. There's definitely some pros and cons that go to it, but for aspiring new players, it's a good entry point to see, like, one, do you like DMing? If you haven't DM'd before, and on the player side, do you like D&D, or do you like whatever game system that we're using? Do you like role playing in general? Is this a thing that you'd want to do without having to say, yeah, I'll give it a month of like multiple sessions in that month to see how I feel about this.
Yeah. One shots are also a good way to test out like different game systems too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's one of the biggest pros of a one-shot is its flexibility, because there isn't this big commitment on either side, on the DM or the players, of time or anything like that, that you can use new game mechanics, you can use entirely new game systems, new settings. If there's stuff that for whatever reason is maybe restricted or forbidden or whatever it is from the main game that you're playing in, and you want to do a one-shot somewhere else where those restrictions are lifted because maybe the setting doesn't allow it, go crazy. That's exactly what the one-off is for. And in that same vein, it's usually less work for the DM, because they don't have to plot out, okay, what's everyone's backstory? How do we tie this in? What's the main overarching plot? It's more, what's the scenario for today? How do we get the players there? And then let's run the game, pretty much.
Yeah. I've seen so many players approach a one-shot or like a sort of mini one-off arc with a brand new character with a super well-developed backstory and everything, and I have to be like, hey, none of that matters. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you've wasted your time.
You've wasted your time. You put a lot of energy into this, and that's wonderful, and I see that, but also, like, why?
We're playing this for like one evening, man.
Yeah.
which is another thing. Easy to schedule. You only need to find whatever day or few days you're going to be playing this mini thing, and then you're done.
Yeah, and we're saying like few days because sometimes a one shot can like spill into two, but really, if your one shot is spilling into more than 2 sessions, ask yourself, like, okay, by definition, something is wrong here.
Something's wrong. And that's another thing I was going to bring up on the scheduling bit. Just the one shots are a test of your time management, because, like you say, you should be done the first time you're running whatever the one shot is. You should get to you should be able to get to the end and say like, okay, we've had a complete game and the party lived and or the party died or whatever happened.
It's absolutely a great way to, well, practice pacing.
Yes.
Because I think what happens is people get concerned with, letting their players have role-play moments, but also taking care of plot elements and, like, moving it along, and they can't really figure out that balance, so you get lost in the sauce of one or the other, where either the one shot that was supposed to, take 4 hours to run through took an hour because, we just ran right through it.
Yep.
Or it takes 4 sessions.
It takes 4 weeks.
Yeah,
to
4
get through
3-hour sessions to do what?
Things have really out of hand.
Yeah, it's definitely a test of pacing.
Test of pacing, test of time management, and the con potentially of the one shot in that case is if you're letting the players have those moments. In a longer campaign, you can be like, okay, next week we'll get to this other thing that I was planning. That today they just faffed around and shopped all day. Okay, fine.
They got to know each other. They got to bond. That's cool. That's fun.
Because that's going to pay off.
This is a one shot that doesn't. You don't really go into a one shot for that. You can get some of that, but
yeah.
It's not the core of what a one shot is.
It all depends on
the
it all depends on the tone of the game.
Right.
If the tone of the one shot is you're doing like Clue and like someone's been murdered and you're in a haunted house and you have to figure out what's going on and maybe one of you is the killer, then the whole game is going to be role play and figuring out who's who. But if it's, we're on a quest to go retrieve a thing or go rescue someone.
You've got a dungeon and a dragon.
Yes. Then you have a set goal, and like, yes, those character moments are great, but then the DM on the time management side needs to know how to edit to say like, if I'm gonna afford them time to do this character stuff, then are they gonna be able to get done with this dungeon or get to this end point? And in those cases, on the editing point, there could be entire sections of the quest by the book or the quest as it was planned that can be ripped out or may have to be ripped out for time because
or just skipped over by your players, yeah?
Or that's a different thing. That is no. Skipping over by the players, that's something that happens like in the world because of decisions they made. Editing stuff out by the DM is like, oh, we're taking too long. We need to get done by 10. Let's, oh, you guys get to this other room.
One shots are definitely a place where some amount of tracks, maybe not a full railroad, but like a people mover,
monorail
is okay. A little bit of a monorail situation. Yeah. Like a Disney World dark ride.
And I think that's much more acceptable in a one-shot situation where I think I've mentioned it before, every DM railroads their players to some extent to get them, unless you're in like an extremely open like world crawl game where it's completely driven by the players. Every DM, if you're following a story, railroads you to get you back on track to where you're supposed to go. Just the better DMs don't make it noticeable. But in a one-off, it's absolutely potentially even expected if things are going too long for the DM to kind of set the rails and say, hey guys, okay, you've been doing, all this stuff. Now you're in this, now you're getting to this new area that has this new foreboding, sense of whatever, however you're going to describe it. where it's the end area because like you have an hour left.
Yeah. Where like, maybe they go into a room and they were supposed to look through several boxes, but you're like, you know what? We got cut for time. There's one box, and in that one box, wouldn't you believe it, there's the thing you needed.
Guess what? Like
yeah.
So like time management, and I think to the newer DMs who are curious about if this is a thing for them, yeah, the time management aspect is a huge one, because there's a lot that goes into it. Like, one, do you like actually running the world, playing all the characters? Because one person we've spoken to is like, yeah, I get the DM portion of it. I hate having to play everyone else in the world. I like playing one person. And then also, can you manage your time properly? And then to the experimentation point, that you can also be looser with things, and maybe a little freer or more brutal with the combat, because if someone dies in the game, okay, there's probably not that huge amount of investment there. There are the players who will write a book for their characters. Hopefully the TM will tell them ahead of time, like, no, you don't need to do that. Give me like a few lines. Give me a paragraph at most.
We keep saying it. Bullet points.
Bullet points. In some of the stories we're going to talk about from our experiences, it is much, much easier to kill individual players, or sometimes the entire party, because everyone's free to be a little looser, a little more reckless with some of the stuff that they're doing, because they know as players, this isn't going to go anywhere. This isn't going to be a continuing thing.
Mm-hmm. There's consequences, but they're not. They're sort of ephemeral. You won't feel them for long.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, any consequences that you have should probably be immediate in the game. And maybe, kind of story-wise at the end, like, oh, you don't save the princess, she's stuck in the castle forever.
Or you release the dragon-hating princess onto the world, and then that has effects on, like, other people's games.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about that later.
So in the same way that, so for some players, the fact that, there isn't that much emotional investment in the characters, there's some players who are going to see that as a con, and there's some people who are going to see that as a pro. Mm-hmm. I have gone from being one to the other. I used to like love having to build this like deep, rich backstory for my characters, but now I'm just like, I don't know. He's a robot clown. I don't know.
You're getting there. You're getting to the point of like, yeah.
I'm not worried about it.
I'm not worried about the story, man. I just made this character because I thought it might be cool.
He's a funky little robot clown. I don't know if he speaks with a French accent. I don't know anything about him. I know that he can kind of do magic. He can pick locks, and he's kind of dumb. That's it.
I thought this might be a cool idea. Let's make up the story as we go.
Yeah. And one-shots are a great way to test out new character builds. If you're like me and only ever play mages, it's a great place to be like, okay, maybe I should try playing a melee character like once, but then like cheat and play an arcane trickster rogue.
Arcane trickster rogue. You did a barbarian one time, right?
I've built a barbarian, but I've never played her. Really? I don't think.
I thought you played it one time on that one shot we had with like a ship.
Yeah. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, you did the barbarian. You got the taste of the martial classes at that point.
I think because that used so much like less of my like no shade to you melee players out there, you barbarians out there, but I'm so used to the like textbook I have to keep for playing like the druid,
all your spells, all your wild shapes, all
every turn just being like, I punch him, I hit him,
no,
and I do a kick and I rage and
turn number 1 I rage, then I do those things.
Yes, I bonus action rage, and I think that's why it just didn't like stick in my memory, just because it didn't use up too much RAM.
I mean, hey, that's part of why I like martial classes, and not to say that martial classes can't have big involved stories, and some of them have some pretty complex mechanics once you get into the later levels. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love martial classes for their general simplicity, and not to say that I wouldn't play a mage, just like, whenever I get the chance to play, it's usually in someone else's game and maybe for a one-off or tiny thing. So I'm like, I'm not going to bogart too much time on figuring out what magic I need to do. Let me go ahead and smash.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely recommend. Nowadays, I definitely recommend, like, new players to start with a melee class.
Yeah.
Start with a barbarian, start with a fighter. Because
Always
it's very
recommend that.
easy to understand. I have big stick, I hit with big stick. Or
Yeah.
I have magic fist, I punch.
Yeah, that's, martial classes are great intro classes for new players. Just, know the mechanics of the game.
Mm-hmm.
When you roll initiative, how the hell does that look? You don't want to have to, figure out what do all your spells do and what's the action timing on all of these things. And for your first game, that's not great. But if going back to the one-shot thing, if you've been a melee player forever, but you're curious about, how does the wizard class do it? Then that's your spot. Go ahead and create your wizard, have your spell book, and be like, all right, now that I have a kind of grasp on things, or I want to get a grasp on these spellcasters, how does this work? And I have to think of, like, area of effect and crowd control and all this stuff.
I think that's valuable for someone who, like, if you're someone who is usually a DM, you know the martial classes well, you don't know the mage classes too well, play in a one-shot as a mage. You learn a little bit of it, and then you can take that back to when you're DMing. Yeah. Even though, again, DMs don't have to know everything, but, like, we know that. That's
no, but
foundational.
Yeah.
But,
seeing how one is played, you as the DM can say, like, okay, how do I play with this person's resources? Of, like, okay, you're a warlock, so you have pretty big magic, but you only have a few slots. So how does the DM try to, like, get you to use those up? Because that's a strategy for the mobs that they might put into place.
Yeah. And it's kind of in the same way that, like, a band director doesn't have to know how to play every instrument, but they should know how every instrument kind of works at least. In a similar vein, I guess, when you are a person who's DMing a one-shot, as far as, and this goes back to pacing and time management, find out, hey, is this your first time playing this class? And plan for it, because combat's gonna take longer, because that person's gonna be trying to figure stuff out.
Yep. And then my last thing on my con list, we went through all the pros, but one last thing on my con list, and this is mainly specifically for pre-made one-shots, so if you're running out of a book or a PDF, they can potentially be more constraining, because if you're creating your own world, or even if you're running an existing campaign, you have multiple sessions, you can correct. If something weird happens in one section, you can adapt and correct in the next one. Versus if you're doing a one-shot, everything's pretty much set in stone in the PDF already, so you know that the players start point A, they have to get to point B by the end to, finish the quest and everything. There are a lot more constraints. Not a one-shot, but one thing that you're kind of grappling with right now is Curse of Strahd, where you know that, okay, here's the entry point, then there's all this stuff in the middle that they have to do, and at the end, boom, Strahd.
Yeah, here's point A and point Z, and the alphabet in the middle can be jumbled up, but it's still the alphabet.
Yeah, and
the other time I had a problem with, not a problem, but, like, I had a experience relating to this.
Okay.
With that one shot that I ran, you actually played in it. I was testing out a puzzle
pre-made
dungeon
puzzle
for my campaign, and I mean, that's a little, like, footnote, but, like, yeah, one shots are also, like, if you're a DM and you're DMing a campaign, that'd be like, if you get a different group of people together, you can use that a one shot to experiment with a puzzle build or a certain encounter or a certain thing that your players are going to need to solve eventually.
Something you're interested in, and you want to see how it runs.
Yeah. And it was the Labyrinth. I found it on DM's Guild. It was a really cool one-shot, but there were some changes that I needed to make to it, and it was a little unclear. And there were certain things that were kind of, constraining about it. And this is more of a problem now in the age of digital D&D, the map that the one-shot depended on, it really depended on not actually being shown to the players, and I made that mistake.
Yep, we saw the map from the beginning.
Yeah. But again, that's a matter of trial and error. Which is why I tested it out on you guinea pigs.
Yeah,
and I
but
never even got to play it in the game, but that's fine.
we'll talk about that same one shot because that's also how you got dropped into the deep end of the pool.
I don't think that was that same one shot.
It was.
No.
We'll go into it, but I'm pretty sure it was. But
No, not the labyrinth one shot. The one shot where you guys threw me in the deep end of the pool. The first time I ever DM'd was back in, oh God, I don't even know when I was in the very first campaign I was ever in. And our DM was kind of like, he needed a break, so we had decided we were going to do each week, each one of the players was going to run a one-shot that had something to do with our character's backstory.
Okay.
That was the premise. Not everybody did that. And so I made this one shot. I spent way too long on the lore part of it.
Let's get into the damn story right now. Because we're already talking about it. Yes, you're right. There was one other time before that.
I was underprepared. I got way too into the lore part of the one shot.
This one shot that you're running.
I didn't actually, like,
look at the mechanics.
build a one shot. I didn't actually build a one shot. I just sort of monologued for half an hour. Yeah. Hey, we're not all perfect. We don't all do things right the first time.
Very few of us do.
Exactly.
No, yes, I remember this now. Yeah, I had completely forgotten about that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So yeah, it was we were in like an inn sort of place, and then some shadiness is going on downstairs, and it's a demon. or a devil or whatever.
Except she had like no minions, and you guys actually killed her in like a round, and I had to falsify her hit points so that she would at least last 3 rounds.
7 of us in that one shot? So
no, less. It was 5.
Really?
Yeah. Because it would have been you, our DM, and then player. Yeah, 5.
Okay, but I think we were all level 5 to begin with. Mm-hmm. So that's 5 of us, versus one big thing. The action economy was way on our side because at level 5, a bunch of all of our martial people got extra attack. So now we're fighting this thing. We're in its lair, but you're not using its lair actions because I don't think you knew what those were at the time.
I was going to use, I like literally in the middle of that combat, I read about lair actions.
This is the other thing we'll always refrain beyond setting expectations. Prepare. Like, be prepared with like the bare minimum, folks. Read the thing. Read the stat block of the monster that you're using.
Yeah, although we say there is such thing as too much preparation, obviously there is such thing as too little preparation. Yeah.
So, to that point, we had an hour plus at least of, like, role play of, like, what everyone's character is and where everyone's coming from and all this stuff that's going on and trying to unravel this mystery. And then we pretty quickly unraveled the mystery. And then we ended up in the combat. And in the combat, we just shoot up the boss because it was one thing by itself that maybe had a couple of attacks. And no minions, and then you weren't using its lair actions to screw with us. So it was basically us just like dogpiling this one thing. Which, beginning DM sort of, learning, growing pains of, like, HP by itself isn't like a shield for these big baddies. They need to do some other stuff to these players. I was literally like in the middle of the first round as you guys were very, very quickly killing this. I was like, oh shit, that's right. Layer actions, minions. And I was literally in the next round, I was like, okay, I'm going to have a bunch of like, I don't know, goblins or something show up. And I'm going to have like this layer start to like, I don't know, spew acid or something at them. I don't know. And I didn't even get to that because even with the hit point padding, I didn't have enough time. Yep. I remember that because my character was some crazy blade-packed warlock that I'd made, and he spent the first round, like, powering up all his stuff, and next round he was going to do it, and by the next round, he was already dead. I was like, oh. Darn it. uh, but yes, I do remember that. And that's, DM lesson from that one is be prepared. And from experience, when there's a situation like that where the action economy is much in the favor of the players, hit them with whatever the biggest thing that monster has off the bat. If it's a big spell, big attack, hit them as hard as you can off the bat, because they're going to start chewing up the boss immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't coddle your players, especially in a one-shot. Like, you shouldn't coddle your players, period.
Yeah.
Well, ellipses, but...
most of the time. But
in a one-shot, all bets are off, because at the end of the one-shot, if somebody's mad because they lost more hit points than they expected, or their character died, you just say, well, you could still bring the, you can play that character in another one-shot, nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's a one-shot.
This is all done. Imaginary, by the way.
The book's closed.
Yeah, and that's just not a one-shot thing. That's more, I've learned, a combat thing of when the action economy is definitely skewed in the player's favor, which it usually is, unless they're fighting some sort of horde. Hit them with the biggest or most disruptive thing that monster does off the bat. So if it's a blind spell or a darkness spell, hit him with that first, because then that's a big area. It screws up everyone's vision. It makes combat much harder for melee characters, and then have them deal with it versus trying to start small and then work your way up, because by the time you get to maybe round 2, you've already chopped off a good chunk of this thing's HP.
Mm-hmm. You live and you learn. If you make these mistakes the first time you're DMing, you're gonna notice.
Yeah.
And you'll make those adjustments as time goes on, as you run more games and as you play in more games. Yeah.
So that's one of your stories that I'd completely forgotten. Yeah, I remember that one now. But that wasn't throwing you in the deep end of the pool. That was the other one that we'll talk about in a minute with the labyrinth.
No, that literally was. Oh, no, wait.
No. You were preparing for that one. Yeah,
I actually prepared for that one.
Yeah, you were actually preparing for the one. Screw it. Let's talk about that one too. So that was the one that you were preparing for, and I think that was the first time you'd ever DM'd. But then the time I was referring to was the time where you were running, you guys were quote unquote running something at someone's house, but you hadn't decided on who the DM was, and then someone dropped out. So you're like, hey, okay, can you come over? Do you want to fill out our party on this thing? Sure, okay, cool, I'll come over. So I'll make the drive up to, up to wherever it was when this was happening. We get over there, and I'm like, okay, got my character ready, brought my, all my stuff. Okay, so what are we doing? And I get over there, and everyone's looking at me we don't know. So I essentially just play not it, and I'm just like, all right, Lisa, you're running the game? All right, we'll start playing 30 minutes. I'll help get ready with the DM screen and stuff, and I'm just like, I was not driving up to just...
To DM?
to just run someone's game for someone that... They just got a bunch of people together.
I walked into that apartment ready to play my character, and then everybody immediately turns to me before even saying hi. Mm-hmm. You're all just like, by the way, you're running.
No, I know what happened is because you had to step out for some reason, and you were helping someone get parking or something outside, because the parking lot was kind of weird there. So I'm talking to everyone else, and okay, what are we running? What are we playing? Who's the DM? And everyone's like, oh. So I'm like, okay. When Lisa gets back, she's running. And that's why as soon as you enter the door, all right, Lisa, you're running. All right, I got a DM screen for you right here. Let's go. What are we playing?
I literally do not remember what I ran. I don't know. I don't know.
I remember it was pretty. It was the labyrinth puzzle that you had. We had to go into the labyrinth and maybe find something or figure out the puzzle or whatever. And I think it was a Minotaur.
Right.
So we had to deal with the Minotaur.
It was the first version of the labyrinth. This was before I found the one on GM's Guild. So this one was. Wow. So that one was entirely off the cuff. That one was entirely.
I think I remember you were doing a lot of this from memory. So that's why we had a hard time finding our way through that labyrinth.
Yeah.
But that was...
Well, I mean, that's fine. It's a magical labyrinth. If you can't find your way through it, that's kind of the point. I remember there being something about a mad scientist.
Yes, I think there was
the
some
shadows.
Scientists. There was a minotaur involved, I think.
Shadow creatures. Okay, yes, I remember because that was when I discovered the whatever. It was like some shadow thing. No, it was like specifically called like a shadow something.
Okay.
I don't know. But that was terrifying and I'd blocked it out of my memory.
That was me specifically goading the rest of the group to just throw you in the deep end of the pool because you'd been talking about, hey, I want to, run my own campaign or do my own thing for so long. So I'm like, she's going to do it. Just like we're doing this right now. She's going to get the experience. She's going to get her feet wet. Go. And then, yeah, we're just like, run this thing. And I don't think we ever really finished because like I said, you were doing this half from memory. So I don't think we ever figured out what the thing was to escape the labyrinth because I don't know if you remembered at the time.
Yeah, no, straight up. I did not know what I was doing.
That's another thing. If DMs are wanting to play and then they're being wishy-washy about it, group, friends of those DMs, just throw them in the deep end of the pool. Be like, hey, run something for us now, right here, as you're in the same room with us.
Yeah. I think I asked for 10 minutes so I can make a list of something,
whatever it was, and then we played the game. It was fun and it was weird and it was wacky. It was definitely successful in the way that it was fun. It was some fun D&D, and we all our characters interacted, and we were dealing with whatever things you were throwing at us. I don't think it was successful in the fact that we finished it, because I don't think we ever got to the end of whatever it is. But, it got you that experience of okay, this is what it's like to run. This is what it's like to run on a very, short timeline with no prep. So I want to prepare.
Yeah.
Couple one-offs from your, because those were your two real first DMing experiences, both traumatic in their own way, but they taught you and you definitely got better from there. That you were way prepared for your first session, on paper and also emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's that I don't know if you've ever heard comedians talking about the first time they go up and they do a stand-up routine. The first couple times you do it, you're gonna bomb. Mm-hmm. And you have to be prepared for that.
Yes.
And there's no way to prepare for that fully without just doing it.
Beyond
you have
just
to
doing
bomb to be prepared to bomb.
That was my advice to you when you were like, hey, I want to be a DM, what do I need to do? Just do it. Just do it. There's I could talk about it all day, but for you to do it will speak volumes more. DM tip number 8 million right there. Okay, so those are a couple one-offs that you ran, and then one we referenced at whatever episode we recorded previously, or maybe not, depending on how these come out in recording order. There was a PDF I got from the DM's Guild, Valentine's Haunted Manor, and you referenced this before of, all right, we've got a party, we've got a quest, we've got a pretty, good intro, and we're going to go into this quest, and this comes into the constraints bit of the party just ignores the entire story. For anyone who's run Valentine's Haunted Manor, it's a nice free PDF. It's got a nice little backstory in it, and it's the whole thing of it is this not unrequited love, this forbidden love between a vampire and this other girl, and it's all the stuff happened in the past, but there's a curse on the manor that all the ghosts in it are continuously reliving this thing that happened a long time ago, and the party has to figure out how to deal with it, or they're going to be stuck there and become ghosts themselves. And there's all these little tidbits of, you can find a letter, you can find a book, a diary with someone's, thoughts and everything on what's happening, and you can go into the crypt or the mausoleum and find the vampire's body.
We never went into the mausoleum.
You didn't. You ignored all of that. This is something that comes with one-offs, especially when they're pre-made, of you can have a story in place that has, a logical beginning, middle, and end, and, this is how the party's gonna get to X, and they can just be like, nope, we're throwing all that out the window, and we're not exploring anything, we're just going to the top of the manor, we're gonna find the forbidden door, and we're just gonna open it up, and, all the ghosts are gonna wanna party with us now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as those characters know, they did a good thing that day.
So, yeah, you guys essentially got the bad ending, because the good ending is there is the spirit of a child that's up in the top of this manor that you need to lay to rest, and if you do so, the child, the mother, everyone who was wronged can be put to rest, and then the party has a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling in their hearts. Instead, you opened up the door.
Damned the baby
Yep.
to eternal suffering.
To eternal hellfire. Yes, you opened up the door, you just let the big bad gas dude just walk in there and just take its soul, and then from that point you were pretty much that was it. All the good ghosts were gone, all the bad ghosts except the big baddie were banished, because they had fulfilled their zealous role of destroying this abomination, but the main baddie was not, because he had a bigger curse on him. So then you had to he was
fight him.
The big final fight.
It was a cool fight. Caitlin killed him with a moose.
With a moose. So I want to walk through that, because these are the situations you could get into when you're getting weird with a one shot, because the party's getting swarmed by all these ghosts and they're getting taken out, and some of them are abandoning the party and running away, and that entails jumping off of a third-story floor to the first floor, which some of them are fine with, because one of them was a monk, one of them had featherfall, whatever. So they were able to jump away. But once the big baddie takes the child's soul and all the other ghosts poof away, the party's beaten and bloody, but they're all up at the top of the manor except for one player who abandoned the party and is now facing the giant boss at the bottom, because that's where his corpse was, in the graveyard where he jumped down to. So we have this situation of Featherfall coming in clutch, where it was your character, right? Using Featherfall on someone else, just doing the Aladdin "Do you trust me" moment.
I did Featherfall in the preamble. In the little prologue, and then it came in clutch in the third act.
Oh my god, that was amazing.
Chekhov's Featherfall.
So it goes from being this somber, mystery, let's figure out what's going on, to just some sort of weird action movie now. Everyone's jumping out of the building to fight this last baddie. They're doing all this damage, crowding around him, but he's a Frankenstein, and he's got lots of HP, and he's dealing out damage to the party. And then one of our friend Caitlin, our mutual friend Caitlin, who is one of the best D&D players we've ever played with, takes a moose out of her bag of tricks, and the moose stomps the boss to death. And that was one of the most glorious, strange, unsuspected things I've ever experienced in D&D.
It was good. It was cinematic. I think that was probably the most cinematic one shot I've ever played in.
Yeah,
because we set up our, because the idea was that we were a traveling group of performers, so we set up our abilities in the prologue, backstory. And then we get our quest, and then we go in, and we're lovable rogues. We're all a little amoral.
Yeah.
Gray morals. And we get in there and we're like, oh, this room has a lot of treasure. Meanwhile, in the other room, there's plot happening, but I'm in this room opening every box.
Getting all the gold, all the things.
Literally, I imagine that, I can see the shot in my mind where it's, in the foreground, here's us digging about in these boxes, pulling out, treasure, and in the background, through the door, you could see plot happening.
Yep.
But you're like, I don't know what's happening over there. I want to know what's happening over there, but, I can't because the camera's over here.
The main plot's happening. If you ever seen the movie, oh no, I forgot. It's an old 80s movie, a RoboCop ripoff, but it's essentially a RoboCop Terminator ripoff. And then the finale is the two main characters finally getting together at the end, and they're like running away while the final battle between this evil robot and the super soldier is happening in the background.
Oh my god. It's like, I feel like Edgar Wright would be the correct person to bring this. Like, I feel it has Edgar Wright energy. It has Hot Fuzz energy.
There's all this big stuff going on, and you're focusing on like the minutia and BS of like D&D.
Well, because that's the other thing to be aware of if you're like DMing something like this. One of the players in that game, that was only his second game he'd ever played, and that was on the same day that he'd played his first game he'd ever played. You know, there's always that like conception of like, oh, let me not touch anything because it's probably a trap, it's probably spring loaded, and literally the solution to the baby ghost problem was just to pick up the baby. But because you have this idea like of I can't touch anything,
I have to be super cautious, everything's gonna try and kill me.
And so we got the bad ending. And, like, you have to be able to play along with that, and one-shots are fun because stuff like that can happen, and you can laugh about it.
Yeah.
Where I think, like, in a longer-running campaign, something like that is going to have repercussions that, like, really do they matter. But, like, they have repercussions, and then characters are going to have discussions, and they're going to have, you know, question their own morality and the morality of their party members, and you're going to, I don't know, it opens up something in a campaign, like a situation like that opens something up in a campaign for
just
character
roleplay
growth.
Opportunity. Yeah, roleplay opportunity.
But in a one-shot, it's a fun, funny story.
And the way that ended is you guys got a bunch of treasure, you banished all the ghosts from the thing, and you just went on your way.
Yeah.
Just left.
Loaded all our treasure onto a tarp and had the moose
You just made a makeshift
drag
moose
it.
cart.
Yeah.
It was a trip. That was a trip of a one shot because I thought you guys were gonna get into this story and unravel this mystery. Like, no, F that.
No, we do not care. Those characters did not care.
Yeah, I want to do something with that troop again at some point because I think you guys are just that level of wacky that whatever I throw at you, it's gonna be fun.
Because I think what's great about, like, I think my personal favorite party makeup is 3 knuckleheads and a straight man.
Who was the straight man in your group?
Technically, it was Tulumbe. It was the monk.
I don't think so.
He was the only, because he was technically lawful good. Technically.
I mean, he didn't, like, act like the straight man. He acted just as wacky as the rest of you. He jumped out of a 3rd-story window when things got a little too hairy.
Yeah, but he also condemned us for stealing, so...
I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the rest of us were, like, liars and thieves, and he's just like, wait, why do I hang out with you?
I guess. If we played again, I guess we could expand on that, but that whole session was just, I don't know. I won't say a shit show. It was just much different from what I expected to happen. So we already had 2 of your stories. So then another one from my side of one-shot horror stories. Specifically, was for one of the gaming stores I was running for. We had one DM who was really kind of the guy day in, day out. He was running Adventure League, and all the players were in there for Adventure League. So, like, okay, I was willing to run any sort of homebrew stuff, but no one was really into that at that point, so, okay, whatever. So he's doing the Adventure League stuff. And this is right before the pandemic hit, right before everyone went into lockdown, where he's like, okay, let's have an epic. And for those who don't know, an epic in Adventure League is when you've got one overarching quest, but you have multiple tables participating in that quest, and then each table's success or failure contributes to the overall group's success or failure by the end. It's pretty badass. That's a pretty badass, like, idea. I've had that same idea not for doing like an AL epic, but for doing an epic of getting players who are playing in the same world and they're their campaigns are potentially affecting one another, eventually having them meet. But that's, a logistical nightmare. And then during COVID, that's even harder. So COVID rolls around, everyone's in lockdown, so, oh shoot, plans for having everyone in the store out the window. But, okay, we can still do it online. We're still doing with Roll20, everyone was still playing up to that point, so, okay, great, let's do it that away. Let's do an epic, we can create multiple mirrored games in the Roll20 and go from there. The issue with any sort of epic, one shot or not, is organization. You've got to have... It'll usually help, at least I'll say, to have an overall organizer who may or may not be a DM to organize where all the players are going to be, how are the games set up, are they set up correctly, does everyone know how everything's going to run, and then also start time and end time, especially for the Adventure League one, they have a specific start time and end time, so if the party doesn't do the quest by X time, they fail. So, I, being the DM that I am, I'm just volunteering. I'm not even getting paid for this sort of thing. I'm just like, you know what, you want to do this? This seems like a cool thing. Let me be involved with this. All right. So I set him up with his Roll20 game. I set mine up and get all the maps and everything, and make sure they line up with the grid, and make sure everything's good for the players, and read through the PDF. And then the guy who was running things, the other DM who's running things day to day, he's like, I continue asking him, okay, yeah, is the Roll20 set up? He's like, yeah, sure. Okay.
Oh, God.
Have you... Yeah, okay, so, and I'm asking about, okay, this bit in the PDF, this seems a little, weird. How do we, kind of handle this? And he's like, oh, yeah, I haven't really, read that part. So, red flags all over the place. Then, the day of this epic, biggest red flag in the world, he's like, okay, so we have 2 tables, let's go ahead and put everyone in the same game.
Oh, God.
So, now we have, and for anyone who's played an Adventure League Epic, you'll know that each table is meant to have a limit of players. The reason of which is going to become apparent very soon. Instead of having 5 or 6 players that we had before, now we've got 12 or more players. Plus me being the DM because I actually know how to use Roll20, versus this other guy who had not learned how to use Roll20 and not asked for help at any point. So I'm running a dozen people where I was not anticipating that. Also because he didn't do any of the preparation. Probably didn't read the PDF or set up the actual Roll20 maps or anything like that. Because I looked in afterward. I'm like, oh, how's your setup? Oh, you didn't do anything. Oh, that's probably why you wanted to... Yeah, that's... a-hole. So, the reason why you don't want to overload any of the tables in an Adventure League game, especially an Epic, is because, as I mentioned before, they're on a time limit. So if you've got 4 to 6 people in a group, they can make decisions fairly quickly and move on. And if they need to do something, especially in combat or initiative, they can get that stuff, out of the way. Everyone just jumps over the gap or fights the thing or whatever it is. If you've got a dozen people doing that, that takes much longer. It's not twice as long. It's orders of magnitude longer.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where we had to cut out certain, talking about pacing, cut out entire sections of the quest that they were supposed to be on to get them to the end before their time limit was up. Because if we just went through everything as they were supposed to go through, they would never have made it. They would never even made it to the end of the quest, and they would just auto-failed from there.
And we know. We've talked about AL and auto-failing and how people feel about that.
Yeah. And then we throw them into the end, into the big arena area at the end of the game, which in this one was super weird because they had a 2D map, but it had different elevations, but it didn't say that clearly on the map, and then they had a 3D profile map that you had to show them at the same time. It was a mess. And the DM I was playing with didn't really know how to explain any of that, so... it's a bit of a cluster at the end, The whole thing is the party starts on one side of this chasm, essentially, and they have to go through and get to the other side. And then rescue this person that they've been sent there to rescue, or defeat the big baddie, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They start doing all this stuff, and most of them are climbing down and dealing with the mobs that are coming through. But because it's AL, they've all had time at the level that they were to just, like, have brooms of flying. So they just flew over the last encounter, most of them, and just got to the other end, and they start wailing on the last boss. And there's this whole big twist of, like, oh, the person they were sent there to rescue was actually a bad guy or something, I don't even remember. But the biggest thing is, like, okay, we're getting to the end of this thing. I'm looking at the time. It's like 5 minutes to the end. They're not even close to finishing it. And I'm looking and like, this mob, this boss has some very high-level spells. So I'm like, okay, looking at the situation, this is what she would do. And she has, like, the time stop spell, whatever that's called. So she stops time, takes the guy that they were supposed to rescue, and leaves.
Oh, boy.
And then they fail. Because I'm like, that's what she would do.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what I would do.
Yeah. So there's a half a revolt in the chat of like, oh my god, like, this is a terrible time, and like, oh my god, yeah, I can't believe we paid for this, and all this. I'm like, have y'all never experienced failure before? Because I figured out after the fact that this DM was absolutely just kind of letting them win. There are very few people who I'll say is a bad DM. This guy was definitely a bad DM. Because Adventure League has pretty stringent rules and pretty, set success and failure states. And he was just pretty much letting them win on everything. So when they, like, tasted failure for the first time in, like, a big way, they were like, what? This can happen?
Yeah. Wow. I guess, okay, that's an aspect of, like, this is a tangent, but that's an aspect of, like, paid D&D or paying somebody to DM for you. That, like, definitely complicates things because, well, like, you're paying money, so I can see how that's going to make you want to be like, well, I'm paid you, so I better win. Mm-hmm. But also, like, you should know what you're getting into.
Yes. And I take your point, and I understand that expectation being there from either the DM or the players. Like, the DM might be like, they're paying to be here. Like, they should probably get to the end of this thing and, like, handle it. But that goes back to our, like, point number one of, like, setting expectations. Because we are, we're seeing this with some of the gaming group. There's definitely different expectations for some players over others. Some of them are definitely, like, I paid to come here to play in this game, and I want to get to the end of the quest, success or failure, and even sometimes, like, success, by the end of, the night, by 10 or 11 or 12 or whenever we leave. Whereas others are like, I want to roleplay buying celery. Which
hey, don't call me out like that.
not even you. This is other folks who also like to buy celery in D&D. But...
Can I buy the components for a taco, please?
Both... That's a Taz reference, isn't it?
It sure is. Oh, I'm so proud of you.
I knew that one. I know that reference.
All right, Rogers. Please continue.
In that situation, I think it's very important up top in any paid D&D situation to set the expectations of the players of, like, what's most important. Because if the players all agree, like, we just want to finish the quest and get to the end of the thing by the end of whatever session that we're in, then, like, okay, then the DM can set that expectation and set that pace properly. Because then he can see, like, okay, if people are going off on tangents too much, like, okay, get them back on track because they want to get to the end of this and they've expressed that with their voices but also their dollars. But then, if the goal of the table is to have fun, then, yes, there can be an overarching story going on, and in this case we have an overarching campaign. going on. But every session, obviously, they've got to pay to come in for the gaming store. So in that case, if the expectation is there that, okay, we're here to have fun as a group because we like each other as a group, and if we get to the end, so what? Or if not, if we're role-playing buying celery, or role-playing drinking with the captain of our ship, or whatever it is, which are things that have happened in this game, then everyone should be okay with that. But then the friction comes when some of those players are like, I'm paying to be here, I want to get to the end of this thing, you're wasting my time. Whereas everyone else is of the opinion of like, no, this isn't a waste of time, this is the game.
Yeah.
Then there's that friction there, and like feedback has to be taken in, and people have to be, taken aside, and expectations have to be kind of reset. And then if those, if the expectations can't be met and don't match up, then those players shouldn't, the game isn't for them, and that's totally valid and fine. Don't come in and spend your money and spend your time if this isn't the thing that you want to do, because if the whole group was like that, yeah, okay, we'll adjust because this is the game for you all. But if everyone else is having fun and laughing and enjoying, and this is what they're here for, and then you're the one, then like, okay, this is not a group thing.
Yeah, I don't know. This may be harsh, but if you feel like just because you paid, you automatically should win,
that's the
maybe
other
just
thing,
go play video games or something.
Yeah, video games in 2020. You can pay EA or whoever your money, and they'll just
There's lots of games that are pay to win.
They'll just skip most of the game for you, and you'll get that win screen, and there you go, whatever that gets you. Oh yeah, that's the other thing of like that obligation of like, we paid, so like I should win. And I'm like, that's never on the table. for any good DM worth their salt. That's never on the table, regardless of if you paid or not. Like, if you're...
Yeah, you can't bribe your DM. Like, we all make jokes about, like, bribing your DM with alcohol or pizza. But, just bringing it back around. But, no, that's not how it works. That's not how anything works.
I've heard some horror stories of some things like that happening in pay games, of people paying or even paying more on top of what they're paying to be there to, like, get stuff in the game. And I'm like, oh, that's shady and gross.
Oh, yeah. There's, like, full Crit Crab episodes about, like DMs making their games pay to win, and you could literally, like, pay real-life cash money dollars to your DM to get, like, some game-breaking item.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
That's just defeating the purpose. Like, it's disgusting in video games already. It's disgusting in most things. And then putting that in D&D is a whole new level of crossing the line of, like, what are we even doing here? So, I have a couple other stories, but is there anything you want to throw in the arena?
I think I had a thought and I lost it. I think it had something to do with one-shots. Oh, the idea that, like, you have to finish a one-shot. Yeah. Right? So, in AL, you have the thing where it's like, if you don't finish by the time, it's a failure, or it's a loss, whatever. It's a fail state. And it comes back to that thing of pacing and time management. You have to acknowledge that at some point, as the DM, you gotta turn to your players and say, okay, we said we'd end at 11 o'clock, and it's 11 o'clock, I'm sorry, but the baddie wins and the world explodes, or whatever it is.
Yeah, but I think both of us have been in that situation of, like, you're doing the one shot, you thought you were going to be done by X time, but things are taking longer, and either the group or the DM is like, do we keep going? And at least, this usually happens of, like, everyone will kind of say yes because they've already, I think it's the sunk cost fallacy.
It's the sunk cost fallacy, it absolutely
They've
is.
already put all the time and effort in, like, they want to see how this ends. I'm like, in those cases, it's just like, it's late, people have work, you usually have a time to end because of situations like that. At that point, you don't care about the game. At this point, it's like, I need to get up in the morning.
Yeah. Sometimes it really is just that simple.
And and if you're running a one-shot, you should feel okay with doing that sort of thing. Of like, yes, you hit 11 o'clock, you guys didn't, beat the baddie, you fail. And move on from there. Like, if it's going to be one more round of combat, I think that's fine. But if it's going to be like, you have an entire other section of a castle to clear out. No, they failed. I think that's if you're a DM and you're running it, that you should feel okay doing that, because this isn't an ongoing thing. This isn't going to be picked up again. So there has to be that failure state, just like there is in a campaign, just that the failures are usually longer and more rippling out versus just like Stark and game over, too bad.
Mm-hmm.
So last one-off story for me, and then we'll do a little do a couple of my shout-outs, and then we'll wrap things up. But last one-shot story, nothing crazy in this one. It was just a couple of my cousins who had never played D&D before, and my sister, who was pretty experienced at that point. She'd been playing in a couple games at that point, so she had a character that she liked, and she wanted to play that one. So this is still early days DMing for me, and some early DM pointers are going to come out. First, we had a perfect number. We had 4 folks, we had 4 players, and then me as the DM. They're starting fairly low because, again, they had never played before, so I'm like, okay, let's not start them off super high. They're going to be super confused. And we were playing Pathfinder at this point, so I didn't want them to do too much math.
Yeah.
So they started fairly low, like 1 or 3 or something along there. I can't. The quest was something fairly simple. Like they had to fight some bandits or rescue a person, or just box standard D&D stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But these folks, this was a level of anime crazy that I did not expect and did not know how to handle as a few months in DM. Because, like I mentioned, my sister already has an established character who was a pretty, I wouldn't say amoral, but definitely neutral to potentially very greedy character of not really going out of the way to do good things, just she kind of does her own thing. And this is fairly established. So my cousin comes in and is like, okay, I'm an orphan. My village was burnt down by her character. We're all just like, what?
Oh, that's good.
It's good if we had planned any of this out and if it was going to interact with the game at all, but it wasn't. So I'm like, what's the point? And then, his character was gonna know that she had burned down his village, but also she never agreed to it. So she was like, no, I never did this. What are you talking about? And I'm like, whose story do I cut off here? Now I'd be like, no. No. She says, no, you can't do that to her backstory. But at that point, I was like, who do I agree with here? So we have one player who hates another player irrationally. We have another player who is a video gamey boy, so he doesn't understand the concept of not having bounds, of just being able to kind of do whatever you want. So he's focus on his skills, how do I do this? Very cagey, I'm gonna loot everything. So he's just in the box, and he's not getting out of the box because I'm dealing with the crazy over here, and I'm not having the time to deal with whatever's going on with him. And then my third cousin who's joining in, he's never played this before. He's playing a wizard, so he does the Find Familiar spell. He gets a hawk or anything, oh, this is cool. I can see through the hawk's eyes, and I can do all this stuff cool. Okay, we know there's a band camp over there, so let me fly my hawk over there. And this is the one that just comes down to bad dice rolls of someone notices the hawk. 5 minutes after he summoned it, they shoot an arrow at the hawk and they kill it. And he's like, I never got to use my thing, my cool thing that I got. So it's havoc. It's anarchy of just no one knows what's going on. And then they get to the bandits. They have to deal with some bandits. And one of them has some sort of diseasing knife or something. So he hits my cousin, the wizard, with it. And he fails his save for it. And he gets leprosy. So he's very slowly beginning to rot.
Oh, God.
So then, because they're not working as a team, and everyone's just kind of at everyone else's throat in the game. Not outside of the game we're all cracking up with just the hilarity that's going on, but in the game no one's working together. So the cousin who gets leprosy gets downed, And then the rest of the party just abandons him.
They're like
So
dead weight.
yeah, just like, we're out, bye, see ya.
They just said, "That's rough, buddy."
Yeah, we're having trouble with this fight. See ya. You're no longer useful to us. He's like, wait, what? What?
How very Klingon of them.
So first D&D game ever. That was the first time he'd ever played. And his character gets leprosy. His familiar dies as soon as he summons it, and then he dies like 10 minutes later.
I mean, it's kind of the D&D experience. He got it.
They're of the maturity, because they were younger at this point. They're of the maturity now that they're like, okay, like, we can try playing again and we might do things a little differently. And I'm more seasoned as a DM where I'm like, okay, stop doing that crazy shit, because that's, you're here to do X. This is a one shot, so like, get back on the track. And it's not going to say like, I'm not going to not have people do role play, but the role play is like, I'm actively screwing with someone's backstory during the game. Like, no, let's not do that. To figure something else out.
Which is a good cautionary tale for, like, yes, we did just spend an hour saying one-shots are a great space to play in and just be as weird as you want to be, but also, like, as with all things, moderation.
No, I think it's the other side of, like, that's where you can experiment with your DMing style of being able to say no to certain things, because it's not that this isn't improv where you yes and everything. There are some times where you have to say no, of like, no, that's not gonna make sense for the world that we're in, or no, that's not gonna come into the game at all, so think of something else for your backstory. So curating that no instinct of when to say it, not to say it all the time, but like, what are those red flags, and when should you say no to certain things. So that's my last real story of note. I've had multiple other one shots like you have too, but like I don't think they're anything else of like crazy horror stories or anything to bring up.
I think we'll leave the actual Dungeon with the Dragon in it.
Oh yeah.
For when Nikki comes on.
Yeah,
let's
let's
talk
talk about
Nikki
that.
To talk about that.
Of what was going on in her mind, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, we gotta save some of our stories so that our friends can tell them.
Yeah, because that story really has to be told by her.
Absolutely.
Those are our takeaways of like, one shots are great. They're less work for a DM. They are easier to schedule. They give more flexibility, more potential for experimentation. Go to get new players in. A great test of your time management. Just small cons of like, there's that less investment there. There's no long-term story in place usually, unless the one shot somehow becomes a campaign. And it can be more constraining, especially if you're running out of a book. But those are things that you've got to weigh on if you're gonna run a one shot or not.
Yeah.
So
I guess those are the bullet points.
Those are the taking those notes, man.
That would be a fun exercise. Plan a mini arc, a small campaign, or a one shot, and it has to fit entirely on an index
card. Awesome.
That would be really cool.
That's a good editing exercise. Couple shout outs, because we've mentioned him a couple times already. Crit Crab, he's great. RPG horror stories, usually. He has some like glory stories as well, which are really cool to listen to. But yeah, he's a really great crab. He has a lot of really great stories on his channel as well. So shout out to Crit Crab. They're great. And then the other shout out I want to give, because we mentioned the setting creation, and that clicked off in my head, the sperm method. Whenever we did that setting creation episode, I couldn't remember who I'd heard it from to credit them. It's Dale Kingsmill. She also has a YouTube channel where she talks D&D. She goes into mechanics and her own custom mechanics. She's also awesome. A lot of the things that I've learned about running D&D, I've heard from her. So go ahead and give her channel a look. I wanted to give her that retroactive, extremely late plug. We want you to like, comment, and subscribe with us, because that helps us immensely with the algorithm. Yes, those are all the two shout-outs I wanted to give. Like, comment, and subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. Just because.
Hit the bell or whatever.
Hit the bell.
we're gonna figure out getting ourselves on other platforms too, podcasts, Spotify.
Even on those platforms, if we're already there, like, comment, and subscribe if that's a thing that you can do.
Give us a review, all that stuff. You know, you listen to podcasts.
5 stars, baby, 5 stars.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think with that, this is maybe our longest episode yet.
Possibly, yes.
Which is fitting, because usually one-shots run a little bit longer than campaign sessions. That's okay. And with that, good night.
Adios, everyone.
Oops All Dragons is a group effort. Our show is edited by Noel Hernandez, our theme was composed by Brendan Lyons, and our logo art is by Azif On Q. Links to more of their work and their social media will be in the show notes.